I've talked before about Jack Wong Su. I've said before he's a hero in the truest sense of the word. Jack's a Chinese-Australian, born in Perth in September 1925. He left school at 14, became an office boy with the Boy Scouts Association. At 16, he joined the crew of a Norwegian tanker. He returned to Australia before his 18th birthday and volunteered for the Royal Australian Navy, but was rejected because his father was born in China. Undaunted, he joined the Air Force. And 4 months later, he willingly volunteered for an elite and secret team, which became known as Z-Force. I suppose they were the World War II equivalent of the Special Forces who've served recently in East Timor and Afghanistan. Jack Wong Su's Oriental features and fluency in Chinese and Malay made him the perfect candidate. In 1945, after fighting behind enemy lines for months, he became the only witness to the Sandakan death marches, where Australian prisoners of war were mercilessly massacred by the Japanese. As I've told you before, Jack's written a book based on his war diaries. It's called Blood on Borneo. It tells of the tragedy of the Sandakan massacre, and the tragedy is seen through the eyes of a 19-year-old. Today, General Peter Cosgrove, the Chief of the Defence Force, will officially launch the book Blood on Borneo at the restaurant Edna's Table. And David Jones from MBF has done a wonderful job here, as have the Sir David Martin Foundation. More about them. But I've got this beautiful man here right opposite me, and he looks in great shape. Jack, good morning.
Good morning, Alan.
Congratulations. You're a wonderful man. It's an honour to speak to you.
Thank you.
A dear person. You've had an amazing life.
Yes, I suppose you could say that.
What do you think when you look back on all that?
Oh, well, to be honest, I marvel at the fact that I've survived it all.
Yes. Do you know what I think? I just wonder how some young man at 19 could see all that and not be permanently damaged by it. You must still remember all that?
Oh, yes, very vividly. Very vividly.
Tell us a bit about your life firstly. You were born in Perth. Your father was Chinese, your mother Australian.
Yes.
And you left school at 14.
Yes.
And you signed up with the Norwegian tanker at 16. How much of the world did you see?
Oh, we saw all the Indian Ocean side.
So Africa, yeah.
Yes.
The Middle
all
East.
Up the East Coast, up to the Middle East.
Right.
Persian Gulf.
Right, as a kid.
India.
Not bad for a kid. And then you came back and you thought, this is the life for me, I'll have a go at the Royal Australian Navy.
Well, that's right.
But they said, no, we can't have you.
That's right.
But you weren't going to be beaten, were you?
No.
So you joined the Air Force.
Correct.
And then the Z-Force. So what did you know about Z-Force when you volunteered?
Absolutely nothing.
Oh, what did you find out?
It was pretty difficult to
it was tough stuff,
relate on air.
Yeah, tough stuff, eh?
Oh, yeah, very, very tough.
Would it be like our SAS today?
Yes. Well, you can draw your own conclusions.
What that meant?
From the fact that after the World War II, Z-men in WA, including myself, were lecturers for SAS when I was there in company strength.
Right.
Then when it became regimental strength, they installed their own instructors.
How old were you when you went into combat the first time?
Well, because we're in combat in the Merchant Navy.
Right. So when you were a teenager.
That's right. We're in convoys and.
What were the conditions like when you were there?
In the Merchant Navy?
No, later on enemy lines.
Oh, not the best. But of course, at that age, you don't worry too much.
Yeah.
It's the adventure, I guess.
Were your mates killed?
Well, some of them were, yes.
And that brings us to Sandakan. Now, as I understand it, in March 45, you were part of a 7-man team landed by a US submarine behind Japanese lines in the then British North Borneo.
Mm-hmm.
And your mission was to establish a base on the east coast and assess whether or not the POWs at Sandakan could be rescued.
That's great.
And that's how in August 1945 you came to be in the jungle 2 days after the Japanese surrender, and then the remaining 33 survivors and 2,400 who set out on the death marches were led out of that prisoner of war camp, weren't they, and slaughtered?
Yes.
Did you see that?
Oh, no, I didn't see the slaughter of the last of them after peace was declared.
But you knew they were slaughtered?
Yes, that's right.
And you said it was a hideous sight?
Well, yes, well, I didn't see it, of course, but must have been terrible.
Frightening to think that's happening near you.
Well, yes, and we couldn't believe our own ears when we got the information from our agents.
But most probably, I suppose, some of these poor people were 9/10 dead anyway from malnutrition, weren't they?
Oh, yes.
And so they were being killed because the Japanese wanted to make sure that word never got back to the Allies of the atrocities that had been committed.
Yes.
And of all of them, only 6 survived.
Only 6 survived.
And despite all that, you say that at least 2,000 of the men could have been saved if authorities had acted earlier.
Yes, absolutely.
You received the Distinguished Conduct Medal for your efforts, which is the second highest bravery award after the Victoria Cross. I suppose you would have willingly swapped that for the lives of many of those who died.
Oh, yeah, completely. Because when we went in on the job, we never expected any rewards, and that only came in 1948.
So as General Peter Cosgrove, see, we've got no comprehension of what I'm asking you about. We can just allow our imagination to take charge. But even all these years on, General Peter Cosgrove will launch the book today, and you'll be honoured, as you rightly should be. What is the dominant thought in your mind about 1945?
Well, all the war years from 42 onwards, one really had to, today, one has to have an appreciation of the attitude that existed in Australia, in the community, because the Japanese had taken Pearl Harbor, Sydney Harbour had been invaded by the midget submarines, and we were training only a few months later. Of course, the whole Australian population was on edge, and made it very, very difficult. And of course, every Asian in particular, and there were lots of them here, that came out of evacuated from Singapore and China and all these places. But every Asian was treated with suspicion as being a fifth columnist or involved in clandestine activities, and it became quite a trial, really.
Did you think that you were really fighting for your life and for your future? Did you have that feeling? Did you think the Japanese? Did you think the Japanese might win?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And in your mind, did you know in your own mind what that meant?
Well, of course, in Z we knew what it meant, but I think a lot of the Australian public never were aware how close we were to it. The Japanese were at Port Moresby, and they'd bombed Darwin.
Yep. And as you say, they're in the harbour.
That's right.
They're in the harbour.
And they came into the harbour to torpedo the USS Chicago, the battle wagon, and it was only by purely luck that Chicago up-anchored the night before, went further upstream and re-anchored. Otherwise, it would have got it.
Would have gone. So just finally, you've been through all of this, and yet you're still articulate and you understand what's going on. We've just been through this episode this week of people burning the Australian flag. Do people like you ever wonder whether or not we're not abusing the freedom you fought for?
Well, of course, you can't help but feel that way when once you've been in battle and fighting for your country, and whether you're a patriot or otherwise, it becomes a real issue to handle in later years.
It must be hard. It's lovely to talk to you. You're a special Australian. It's lovely to talk to you, and you'll be honoured today, which you deserve. Have a wonderful day. General Cosgrove will be launching your book. The Prime Minister will be sending his apologies, and there'll be wonderful friends and supporters there, your family included. So we're very grateful for what you've done, and we're honoured to be able to talk to you and share some of that with our listeners.
Thank you, Alan.
A lovely man, Jack Wong Su. Now, you've all written and asked me about Blood on Borneo, his book. It's available for $39.95 through the Sir David Martin Foundation. So here's the number to ring, 9219-2038. 92192038, Blood on Borneo by Mr. Jack Wong Soo.